Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for our Huntsville TOD project kickoff. Now, give everyone a little insight into the format of this meeting. We're not going to spend a huge amount of time on the presentation. We want you to have opportunities to interact with some of the city staff and some of the consultants who are here to look at what we're talking about when we talk about TOD outside on the boards, to leave some comments, to get questions answered one-on-one. But we do want to go through, share some definitions, share some of the thoughts that we've had around this project. So this was enabled by a grant from the federal government that allows us to do a planning study for the University Drive corridor. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we landed on that. But I do want to talk about transit in general. So I am with the planning department, and the planning department, one of the things we oversee is the comprehensive plan. In Huntsville, we know it as the big picture, but a comp plan is kind of a vision for the future of a city and how a city is intended to grow. And one of the biggest elements in that plan has been about transportation, right? As we grow, obviously, this is not just about adding new apartments and adding new homes and adding new restaurants and adding new shops and all that other stuff. It's also about the connective tissue, which is transportation. You can't grow without making significant investments in your transportation. But we also know it can't just be about one thing. Most folks here probably drove here. I'm going to guess if I said who took transit here, probably not a lot of hands are going to go up. But we do know from, did you? Spectacular. Congratulations. Thank you very much. What we want to do is over time see more hands go up. But what we know is every time we do transit route updates, we see riderships go up. Our city was one of the fastest to rebound to pre-COVID riderships after COVID. There's a lot of demand. There's a lot of need out there. So we know we can continue to grow our road network. That's very important, but we know we also have to focus on alternative modes. We have to continue to build out our bike network. Trey, good to see you. We have one of our folks who's working with us on our bike plan here. We have to continue building out our sidewalk network, but we also have to be thinking about the future of transit, and that's what we're really talking about today. So, one of the things that we're going to talk about in a minute is our new transit center, built not just for today, but also to accommodate growth in the future. But we also are thinking the future isn't just about buses. Now, almost every time we ask, hey, what would you love to see in terms of growth of transit? Folks throw their hands up and go, trains. And I love trains. Everybody loves trains. Light rail is fantastic. Light rail is also really expensive to implement, really expensive to maintain, and needs a lot of densities to support it. So what we like to think of is BRT, which is bus rapid transit. And I always refer to it almost as a gateway transit, right? You implement BRT, and that allows you to get used to using those corridors a little bit more intensely. And then, say, 20 years, 30 years, however many years down the road, when light rail starts to make sense, you actually already have a corridor set aside for it. So establishing BRT, which we're going to talk a little bit more about how that functions in a little bit, establishing a corridor for BRT is incredibly important. But one of the things that many cities really struggle with in terms of transit is you want to make investment in transit, but most folks say, well, we don't want to make investment in transit until you can show ridership. Well, it's very hard to get ridership until you can show that you're actually making an investment in transit. So you end up with kind of a chicken or an egg problem with growing your transit. What we're trying to do through this process is do chicken and egg, right? While we're planning for transit expansions through BRT, we're also planning to grow our land use that feeds that transit. We want to do those two things at the same time. One of the reasons we're focusing on the University Drive corridor is there's already actually a lot of existing transit ridership, but there's a lot of opportunity for growth along that corridor. It connects a lot of different employment centers, residential areas. It's got downtown anchoring it on one end. You have a lot of the growth in Madison and beyond anchoring it on the other end. It's really a great place to potentially pilot something like a BRT corridor. When we're doing this, we're also looking to say, we don't want to just talk to the same folks we always talk to about transit. We are trying to be very aggressive. We got a really good consulting team helping us make sure that we're hitting all potential users, that we're getting everyone's input in terms of the vision for the future of this corridor. I recognize a lot of folks here. A lot of you are very passionate transportation advocates. We love hearing from you. It's important, but we also want to make sure we're connecting with the folks who don't always make it out to these meetings, that we're making sure we're getting as many different perspectives as we possibly can. So how you can be involved, congratulations. This is the first step. We appreciate having you here, but we're going to have a webpage up as well. There's an opportunity to connect to us via email and the webpage. We're going to have subsequent meetings. We're looking at a large community charrette later this year that's going to start digging into some of the sites that you saw on the boards outside and really starting to look at specifics. But in short, the best part is you showed up today. Please engage with us after this presentation. We're actually going to run this. If you really enjoy this and you're really into it, we're going to play it again at 6:45 so you can sit through this whole thing again. We'll also intend to post it. Shout out to the UAH folks who are recording this, and they're going to let us put a presentation up as well. But we really want you to engage with. We have some really great consultants here who can answer your questions and talk with you about all things TOD and BRT. But with that, what I want to do is turn it over to James Vandiver. James Vandiver works with me in planning. James has been elbow deep in transit discussions for as long as I have known him. He is going to walk you through a lot of the specifics about what we've been talking about in Huntsville Transit, and then turn it over to our consulting team. James.
Thank you, Dennis. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. So some of the things the city of Huntsville has been doing a lot to invest in transit over the past 10 years. Some of it's been a little subtle, but some of the things you may have seen include extended evening service on weekdays, Saturday service. So now we have 6-day-a-week service for the Orbit system. We have increased bus frequency to every 30 minutes on many of our high ridership corridors. And of course, we've had our new transit center that opened just last year. And as Dennis said, the city designed the transit center to give it room to grow. And as we make more investments in the transit system, we will need that room in the new transit center. And this transit center, like I said, it opened last year. It's at the corner of Pratt and Church, roughly, just north of downtown, north of I-565. If you haven't been there, it's a really incredible facility. Since we are expanding, we're not done yet. We've done a couple of transit improvement plans over the past few years, done some incremental transit improvements. We're on kind of one of the last phases of our most recent transit improvement plan, which was finished in late 2023. That includes adding Sunday service. So for the first time, Huntsville will have 7-day-a-week bus service. We're also looking at our first peak hour express bus service, which will go from downtown to several industrial facilities in Jetplex and Greenbrier, including places like Polar, Polaris, Amazon, Mazda, Toyota. Those employers have reached out to the city. They've had some concerns about employer retention, employee retention because of the unreliability of their way to get to work. And with it being so far out, you have to have a car of some sort to get out there, whether it be your own, a friend, or a taxi. And of course, being that far out, depending on where you live, say a taxi or an Uber or a Lyft can get really expensive, but some people do that. So having a reliable way to get out there is something that we're working on with the peak hour express service. And what that means is you'll have a bus service that runs a couple of times in the morning, and then it'll do the return a couple of times in the evening, and we'll time it towards the shift changes, because these are factories, and so they do their work in shift. And then you may have been seeing, I know I see some transit groupies out there, so you all have been seeing the 40-foot buses. So the city's been adding longer buses. Originally, we've had the 30-foot buses, which are kind of shorter than your typical city bus. 40 feet is kind of typical for your city buses in other parts of the country. We might be moving towards hybrid diesel electric buses in the near future, though that depends on federal funding availability. The culmination of all this, at least for the time being, will be our first bus rapid transit project, or University-Medical BRT, as we like to call it. So in 2022, the Huntsville Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, the regional transportation planning body from Madison County and Eastern Limestone County, completed a regional high-capacity transit corridor study. This study identified the University Medical Corridor as the most viable for high-capacity transit improvements in our region. And it had several reasons for that, including the high jobs and population along this corridor. And there's a lot of density along this corridor, which is very, it's very unique for our region. There's also high existing transit ridership. Route 4, which runs along most of University Drive, at least up to the Super Target just west of Research Park Boulevard, is the highest ridership route on our system today. And it already runs at 30-minute service, and the buses are standing room only in many cases. And there's also lots of potential TOD or transit-oriented development opportunities along this corridor, which is another great reason to do more study on this corridor. And Patrick will go further into what a TOD entails. So this BRT route will run with at least 15 minutes or less frequency. So that, in other words, you won't have to wait more than 15 minutes for a bus to arrive once the BRT is implemented. And this is extremely important for people who rely on transit to get to work or to school or to doctor's appointments. They no longer have to live by a timetable. So as Dennis pointed out, most of you came here by car. So imagine if your car you can only turn on your car once or maybe twice an hour. And that's how it is right now with the 30-minute service. You only have 2 buses that run by every hour. Once you get to that 15 minutes or less, you have 4 or more buses every hour, and it makes it much more convenient, and it's a huge quality of life improvement for those who rely on transit. This first phase of University-Medical BRT, and this is the purple bluish line along here, would run from Huntsville Hospital through downtown, and it would stop near the Northwoods housing development there at Pulaski University. It would run on the north side of UAH. It would stop at MidCity and then end up in the village of Providence. Future phases would extend this further along US 72 to include some of the commercial areas closer to Madison. And ideally, we'd love to have what we like to call the hospital-to-hospital corridor. You'd have Madison Hospital on the west end and Huntsville Hospital on the east end. And this would be the spine for a future regional mass transit network. And this is our first step, and we want to make sure that we're doing this the right way. And as we get closer to designing this route in the station areas, this TOD study will provide the city with the development tools necessary to ensure the success of this project. So I'm going to hand it over to Patrick now, and he's going to discuss more about BRT and TOD. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, thank you, James. Good evening. My name is Patrick McDonough. I'm a senior transit planner with HDR, and we're going to talk a little bit about that chicken and egg frame that Dennis laid out, but also about how that connects with the frequency and the buses coming every 15 minutes that James just laid out. First, a little bit more about bus rapid transit. For those of you who are not familiar with it, and I heard there were some transit groupies in the house, it's great, always good to have you here, but for those who have never heard of bus rapid transit before, imagine a bus with its own lane. The lane is red, and the bus can go down there and other traffic is not in the way. Sometimes you might have cars come in that will make a right turn into a business, but largely when you've got a clear lane, the bus really moves. The second thing that we can do with bus rapid transit to make it more reliable is that we can put technology in the top of the bus and in the traffic signals that give the bus basically what we call transit signal priority. So that means, let's say the bus is approaching an intersection. Normally the light would go from green, then to yellow, then to red. Well, if the bus is within a certain proximity factor, or the distance from the intersection, that gets detected, the signal automatically holds green until the bus clears the intersection, then goes to yellow, then goes to red. When you do this at 17 intersections across a corridor, boy, can the bus make up some time. There are some other things we do, and they're on the board out in the hall. You might see that people talk about off-board fare collection. If you've ever gotten onto a bus and watched somebody like me in college who would fumble with their change to find the 75 cents and a variety of nickels, that takes a long time to get into the fare box, and then you multiply that by 10 people boarding, and suddenly you've stopped for 2 or 3 minutes. If you have a fare card, or if you have a smartphone where you go by and go, beep, people board much faster. They board in about an average of 4.2 seconds. So when you get people on the bus faster, the bus gets moving again faster. All of these are features of bus rapid transit that really makes the service better, faster, and a bigger lever for opportunity for the people who use it. Now, James talked about something coming every 15 minutes, but the bus coming every 15 minutes, yes, that shortens your wait, but then how can we shorten your walk? And that's where transit-oriented development comes in. So when we think about transit-oriented development, and you'll hear me say TOD, to shorten the words for the rest of this talk, it's really something, jobs and homes you can walk to is the easiest way I would explain it. There's transit directly serving the neighborhood. If it's that high capacity, high speed, high reliability mode like bus rapid transit, it makes the synergy between that 15-minute service and the short walk to everything that you get access to much more powerful. So this is actually a picture from Providence here locally. It's kind of a mini transit-oriented development in terms of how it's built. The buildings come up to the sidewalk, few 2 or 4 stories, and then it's more apartments and townhomes than single-family homes. It's what you normally see on the residential side. You'll also see a mix of uses. We'll talk a little bit more with a few other examples here. So TOD, a few attributes. I would say walkable and connected is one that's important. The neighborhood is going to encourage you to bike and walk and use transit first, and your car is a little bit less convenient. It's still welcome, but it's kind of tamed. The buildings are going to come up and meet the sidewalk. And what that means is you might have a more interesting place to walk by. You might have some nice street trees over your head instead of being out in the hot sun like we all have been in the last few days. And that there are walking paths and bikeways and sidewalks and crosswalks everywhere to make it easy to choose to walk. And this building here is called the Bookmark Apartments. It's in Portland, Oregon. The bottom floor is a library, public library, and there are 3 floors of senior apartments above. So if you want to go get a new book, you just get in the elevator, not in your car. Also, transit-oriented development, I would also refer to it as dense and diverse. And when I say dense, I mean that there's a lot of different housing types. There's a lot of commercial in one place. When you, if anyone has ever heard the adage that folks say, rooftops produce, or retail follows rooftops, right? If there are a lot of homes in the area, shopping is going to set up nearby. TOD tries to put that all in one place. So if you have a lot of residents living around that bus rapid transit stop, you're going to be able to attract stores that become community amenities, other community functions as well. This is Southern Village in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is where their university is. I live in the next town over. And this is Market Street on Southern Village. And this picture is a little bit of a lie. There's stores all along the bottom, and it looks like there's 5 different buildings at the top. It's one building with 5 different frontages, and it's along a corridor with apartments. So it looks like 5 buildings. It's one apartment complex above, stores below with restaurants. I think there's a FedEx place and so on. There's a grocery store on the corner. But because there's a lot of density in terms of housing, this street can support that even though it's only 2 stories. Finally, the last piece here is kind of right-sizing parking. In the past, and somehow our suburban layouts have gone, we've thought, hey, how many people are going to drive in the day after Thanksgiving for Black Friday shopping, and then the lot is sized huge and it's considerably empty for the rest of the year. In TOD districts, getting some of these outcomes in terms of buildings is important, so we try to right-size parking to make sure that that's in balance. Finally, TOD is very much in tune with local communities, and that means what TOD looks like in Huntsville is going to be different than what it looks like where I live in North Carolina, or where John lives in Charleston, Maggie's in DC. And so whatever TOD needs to mean for Huntsville, there's an opportunity to express that here. And this is an interesting example that James and I got to see in Phoenix a couple years ago. And Phoenix and here are very different. Well, Phoenix is hot, it's very dry, but they have a really nice transit-oriented development there, right next to a light rail stop, where they looked at housing types in hot, dry places, the Middle East, Pueblo, Colorado, and they built a lot of white buildings that are really close together, that are really good at casting shadows into courtyards in between them. And on hot summer days, they've gone out with one of those, laser temperature heat guns, and the temperature on the boulevard outside is 123, and in the courtyards, it's 90. It's 30 degrees cooler because that shade has been planned for. So the point here is not that we're going to do anything like that here in Huntsville. The point is that you can adapt what you want to do and do this format for a whole variety of situations. This is just one of the most unique ones nationally right now. In terms of spatial layout, James talked about the corridor at large. There are 3 focal areas that we're focusing on in this study: the Northwoods housing development area, UAH, where we are tonight, and then MidCity and some of the surrounding properties. This is just kind of a broader orientation. What do we have in terms of opportunities and challenges here? We have some great stakeholders in this corridor. We have a strong university. We have a well-organized housing authority and HHA. We have development going on in the corridor at MidCity and other places, and developer interests. So I do some work in other communities where there's not as many people moving in, and it's harder to attract development to come in and answer the questions that we'll be asking in this study. But Huntsville has, as you know, a great growth profile, and so there's a lot of opportunity here. This study is an opportunity to harness that growth to get what Huntsville wants in this corridor. Challenges are some of the physical environment ones. US 72 is very hard to cross on foot. There's a history of crashes out here, and these roads often take a lot of effort to retrofit, a lot of partnership between cities, DOTs, communities, developers, everybody working together. So we have some strengths, we have some things we have to work. And then finally here, just to do a little bit of a drill down on the geography some more here, I'm going to show these maps, but also they're out in the hall, so we don't need to linger on them. But again, here we have Northwoods, the Calvary Hill Community Center, Hereford on the south side, with the elementary school there along by Meadow Drive. Here we are kind of in the University of Alabama and Huntsville Central area. Executive Plaza to the left is UAH's primary development opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years. And as this study is largely looking in the next 10 years, we're going to be spending some attention looking at Executive Plaza with the UAH team. And of course, there's a lot of other things fronting the corridor. There's some old buildings that maybe are coming to the end of their useful life, and we can use your help in reimagining what a new future for those places might look like. Finally, out in the MidCity area, there's a big plan for MidCity. There used to be them all out here that I'm sure many of you are more familiar with than me. But also, there's a lot of parking. If you look at all those parking lots, those are opportunities that are places where we can infill with buildings. They're places where we can restore some greenery. There's a shopping mall where I live that they've spent the last 10 years basically uncovering the creek that they covered in the 1970s. And so now not only do we have less flooding because we've done that, we have a nice amenity too on sunny days to walk. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Maggie to talk a little bit about some of the other things we do in the study. Maggie?
Thanks, Patrick. My name is Maggie Adams. I'm also a transit planner with HDR. Happy to be here and get to know Huntsville, so thanks for having us. When we talk about inclusive community strategies, we're talking about including the community. It's right there in the name. And we're here on, day one. This is our first public meeting about this project, and you all are part of that. So welcome, and we want to start hearing from you. One thing Patrick said about how TOD is different everywhere, it's also different in neighborhoods. So those 3 nodes we have, TOD in MidCity is going to be very different than TOD in Northwoods. And so part of the process of including the community, listening, really having you all with us on day one, which is today, is learning what makes those neighborhoods special, what makes them unique. And so when we think about the social infrastructure of neighborhoods, it's what makes it home. It's where you go to work, how close that is from where you live. It's where a kid's school is, what they do after school. It's where they go to the doctor, where you go to the doctor, where you go to church, where you buy groceries, all that good stuff that's wrapped in the traditions of living in a neighborhood. We really are interested in listening and documenting that. And part of that process is, okay, what do we have that's super special that has to be there for the next generation? What do we need more of? What don't we want anymore? Maybe dangerous crossings is one of those, I'd imagine. That picture Patrick posted was pretty haunting. This is the same process in Columbus, where those same conversations happen, and it's really a joy for me to travel around and hear communities express what they want. This process is a pretty cool one, and as those development opportunities really do abound on this corridor, we want to make sure that you all are part of saying what should be there next. So John is going to talk more about all those opportunities to come where you can do that.
We've made it to the home stretch, y'all. So we talked, I love a good through line. My name is John Mitchell. I am from HDR as well. And my heart and passion in the work that I get to do is around connecting communities with infrastructure in a way that feels right-sized and allows for that decision-making process to be one that is a true pulse and bleeding a heartbeat of the project work that's getting done. So, like I said, both Dennis and Patrick have talked about this chicken and this egg. So in my opinion, the goal of the work that we're doing with communities is to make sure that we have the proper feed and incubation for both the chicken and the egg to occur. And that to me is really indicative of the way with which you build that community. So when we're saying begin with the community in mind, we're thinking about public trust. We recognize that it is a thing that is kind of currency that we deal with when you're working with community advisors and when you're working with community stakeholders. You have to recognize that the work that's being done is wholly dependent on how much action you have and how much trust you have with those two entities playing one with the other. So when you're dealing with the city, what are the things that you are very pleased with in terms of how you're getting information, and how are you actually able to feel like, okay, this is a better way with which we can continue and build a strong and foster a greater relationship one with the other. And again, that feeds into the accessibility piece, right? How are we meeting you, quote unquote, where you are? And what are the changes that would make that easier? How can we make it so that the information that we're providing is not having to be searched in a way that is unnatural, but really feeds back into that natural kind of survey that you might do when you're trying to figure out what's going on for the week. And that gets back to that accountability piece. So one of the big things that I would love to have as a legacy for this work that we're doing would be so that once we are done, right, there is a better process in place to allow for you all to know who to go to, how to get things done when it comes to that information sharing. It has been kind of the through line for what we're talking about here. So when we're talking about these things, again, like I said, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. We're also doing TOD for bus rapid transit there, and in that process, it is a grand number of studies with which you have a multi-layered engagement process that goes on, and that starts with what we're talking about today. And as we're moving through this process, we're looking to have kickoff events that are going to see us have those boards that are out there where you're going to be able to find the information that you're looking for. You'll be able to talk to each of us individually, get more insights. There's questions. There's actually a process with which you can kind of highlight on sticky notes and put on the boards. Please take part in all of those exercises and adventures, if you will. There's a sign-up sheet for you to give your information so that we can stay in touch with you. We would love to have you engaged with our future endeavors. As we mentioned, there's a charrette that's coming up in the August timeframe, as well as we'll be where you are, right? There's that concert series in the park. There's opportunities for us to engage as we kind of continue to move through this process. And again, I will end with my two favorite words, which are thank you. So if there's any other question, we're going to have an engagement opportunity, like I said, out in the hallway. And thank you for coming out tonight.